start by saying this is the fourth in the DORA Deep Dive series. And the final one will be in 5 weeks' time, so you'll have a break over the Christmas. Judging by the numbers this morning, we've less than the last 3 weeks, but I guess that's a December thing. However, these are being recorded, and you'll get the slides and access to the recording later. So today we're talking about operational resilience testing. I'm assuming you're all familiar with it, with the basic concepts, and I'm assuming that you're all familiar with DORA at this stage. So I would treat this as maybe a check for you to see, is there anything you've forgotten? I hope there's no surprises for you, but I hope I can bring some clarity to some of the things. So let's kick off. Quick introduction from myself. I'm joined today by Fiona, who's our research analyst, our senior research analyst, and DORA has been something she is herself dived deeply into and knows the regulations pretty well. So she's here supporting me. Talk about the company, we'll talk about DORA Overview, but you again, that's just to really set the scene. And then we'll look at what's in the Act with regards to testing, and then who does it apply to? Because there's kind of two levels. There's kind of the basic, and then there's the advanced for the significant organizations. And we look at that. Okay, and we'll take some Q&A. If you have any questions, pop them into the chat or the Q&A. Fiona will keep an eye on it, and we may take them in the middle, or we might take them at the end. So who are we? Yeah, like most of you, experienced risk and compliance professionals and members of different institutions, just to keep our skills sharp. And although dealing with you guys, that keeps us sharp as well. We make a GRC solution, and in particular, we've added, 6 months ago, we added a DORA element to it, so we could support people with their DORA compliance and indeed the Register of Information requirements. We also have a risk advisory service that we offer. And today, calQrisk is used by, that's well over 3,000, probably well over 4,000. I really must update that. Mainly in the financial services space, probably about 80% of our customers in the space where you are. As always, I try to find a quote that inspires, and came across this one from Robert F. Kennedy, that's John F. Kennedy's brother, who's Robert was assassinated in 1968, also a politician and lawyer. He said, "Only those who dare fail greatly can ever achieve greatly." And I wanted to find a quote really that inspired you to test and not to be afraid to fail. I've done this myself in the past. I have pulled the plug on the computer room with 28 million euros worth of equipment in it, and the UPS worked. And that's really the essence of it. When you really push it and test it, that you know the belt and braces, the backups that you have designed actually work. And you need to know that to be able to sleep. Trust me, it really makes a difference. So don't be afraid to test. Okay, quick summary. You're not alone. All European member states have to comply with the DORA Act, and all, I would say most financial entities also. Came into force 2 years ago, nearly 2 years ago. It's becoming applicable in a month's time, just over a month. And yeah, it's about making systems better in the sense that they're less likely to fail, they're more secure, and if they do fail, that you can get them back up and running quickly. Now, testing is a big part of that, because if you test, you'll test the things that prevent them failing in the first place, whether it's the security, or whether it's the, how many of you lost power to your systems at the weekend, and maybe you found out something when that power is lost. But the best companies not only have less outages, they have less downtime. When you do have an outage, they're back up and running much more quickly than those I would call the laggards. So the testing will, test in an environment safer than having a storm and finding out the hard way. So test and sleep well. Yeah, it does harmonize several guidelines, but I think importantly, it's about not accepting financial buffers anymore as a way to mitigate risk. It's not financing the risk, it's about reducing the risk in the first place and having better, more resilient systems. Okay. We've covered the first three. These are the 5 pillars. Today we're on the testing pillar, digital operation resilience testing. And in 5 weeks' time, we'll talk about information sharing because, smart people learn from the mistakes, but really, really smart people learn from other people's mistakes. Somebody said that, not just me. Only one definition to show you today. It's threat-led penetration testing. You'll see this a lot, TLPT. So let me try and explain. This is directly from the Act. A framework that mimics the tactics, techniques, and procedures. You'll see TTP. I'm trying to avoid the acronyms, but you'll see TTP, tactics, techniques, and procedures of real-life threat actors, of the bad guys. So you're mimicking the bad guys that are perceived as posing a cyber threat. This framework then delivers a bespoke, that means tailored to your organization, intelligence-led. That means it's not all the noise on the internet, but it's stuff that is relevant to you. Intelligence-led test of the financial entities, critical live, not your backup, not your sandbox, but your live production systems. Now, I copied and pasted this in, so the red team is in there. I'm not sure why, but it's the red team that will be doing the testing. They're if you like, the bad guys, the guys acting as bad guys. But we'll talk about that in a moment. So yeah, it's about having tests that mimic what the bad guys would do, and it's as close to reality as you will get. That's what it is. It's the advanced people have to do that, the advanced organization. So let's look and see what the Act says you have to do. First of all, some generic stuff in the Articles 11, 12, and 15. Response and recovery. We'll have covered this under incident management, but just picking out the bit on business continuity plans. You got to test your business continuity plans. How do you know they're going to work? I mean, this is common sense. You've been doing it, hopefully, for years. Well, you test and then you review, and if the plans were deficient, you improve the business continuity plans. And these tests might be for different scenarios. It might be for a loss of power, like we had. I'm sure some of you have had loss of power at the weekend. Could be loss of people, like the pandemic. It could be loss of the building. It could be just restoring from your backup. And we'll get to that again in a moment. Actually, the next one, backup policies and procedures, restoration, recovery procedures and methods. That's the Article 12. And the one I picked out there is test your backup procedure periodically. And it's not just the backup, but it's the restore. And I checked again this morning, and believe it or not, it's still at 50%, has been for years. 50% of restores from a backup fail. I know of plenty in within 3 miles radius of where I am, of where this has failed. Test your restore. It really is, again, helps you to sleep if you know, well, that worked. We tested our restore from Amazon a month ago, and it worked, but you need to know that. You need to know the restore works, particularly when the statistics are saying 50% don't work. So test that. And this is basic stuff still. And Article 15 says that the ESA will develop an RTS, technical standards. So let's have a look. Sorry, the chapter 4, which is the essence really of the testing of the in the Act, gets into more detail. Article 24, I would say, applies to everybody, and I'll go into it in a little bit more detail in a moment, but that is the general requirements for the performance of operation resilience testing. Maintaining the test program, including a range of tests, a risk-based approach. So, focus on the things that matter. Have policies and procedures that will say you will test and you will fix the weaknesses. What's the point in testing if you then don't address the weaknesses that you've discovered? But I'll come back to that in a moment. Article 25 is the tools and systems, testing of ICT tools and systems. Maybe there should be a comma in there. And in the brackets here, I've included, well, it's kind of not copy and paste, but all of the tools and methods that they mention in Article 25. Some you will be familiar with, hopefully, vulnerability scans and penetration testing. Vulnerability scans, basically, if you're not IT, is the equivalent to somebody checking all the doors and windows in your house. And making sure that you're not leaving something open. It's about testing known weaknesses, maybe in the systems that the bad guys will exploit, and seeing, have you patched those known weaknesses? So it's looking for those vulnerabilities, see if they've been patched, fixed, removed, because if the good guys can find them, the bad guys will certainly find them. Open source analysis. If you're using open source code that you've, if it's open source, then it's a free license, but you need maybe to be sure that there isn't some nasty code embedded in it. Network security assessments, again, is maybe the vulnerability of your network, not just of applications. We tend to think of vulnerability on maybe on an application that's hosted in a server in the cloud. It can be also vulnerabilities to your own network. Think of it, you have a router, a firewall out to the internet. Well, has anybody ever tested that firewall? Do you keep the bad guys out of your own network? Physical security. Yeah, if you've got serious stuff that the bad guys want, they are brazen enough to actually walk into your building and steal stuff and cause you damage. Scanning software solutions, source code reviews. Yeah, if you're developing source code that there's somebody else other than the person who developed it who's reviewing it. Scenario-based tests. This is one I personally like and do occasionally, where you pick a scenario, a cyber attack in the company. What if? And it might be. If we just talk about testing your response and your business continuity plans, then you assume a scenario where a successful attack, and how do you react and how do you respond to it. But we'll get into the red teaming in a moment, and we'll talk about scenario tests where a particular attack is targeted on your organization and maybe other organizations at the same time, and how you respond to that. Yeah, performance testing, compatibility testing. The only thing I can think of is that if you're a large organization and maybe you've grown by merging other organizations, you might have different systems. We have all Dell laptops, but I was in an organization once and we had 7 different types of laptops. You have different browsers. Will the same software perform exactly the same on different systems? So, okay, enough on the testing. But the important thing here is that you have a range of tests. And it's, they talk about a risk-based approach. If you've, the higher the risk, I would say, the more varied the testing. You don't have to do all tests on everything, but certainly have a good mix. And then Article 26 is about the advanced testing that applies to large organizations. And you see here, the ESA was to develop an RTS, which they have done, and we'll talk about that now in a moment. Article 27 just says that the requirements for the testers who are carrying out the threat-led penetration testing, that these have to be competent, you would imagine. You would hope that you'd only engage competent people. Ethical, have sound risk management, have professional insurance, PII, insurance. You can have internal testers. This is the difference between TIBER-EU and non-TIBER. You can have internal testers, but they have to be approved and they have to have no conflicts of interest. And certainly the threat intelligence that you're using should be provided from externally, but we'll get into that. Okay, so who does this apply to? And I thought I'll split it into 2 again, and we'll take the description first of the, I would say, advanced, those who have to comply with the advanced testing are those organizations that are you could say large organizations, credit institutions identified as globally systemically important institutions. So large banks and insurance institutions, payment institutions, with total value of payment of 150 billion. Electronic money institutions, again, 150 billion of payment transactions. These are significant players. And if you're a significant player, then the testing does go up a notch, a significant notch. Central securities depositories, central counterparties, trading venues with an electronic trading system that meets at least one of several criteria. And then insurance and reinsurance undertakings with as a gross written premium of 1.5 trillion. So these are large organizations, but the testing that's expected is significant. But those of you, actually, not us, those of you who are not in scope for the threat-led penetration testing, see Article 24. That is, as I said, a significant notch lower, but significant nonetheless. So let's have a look at that. This is what's the expectation, and this is direct from the from the Act as well, and the RTS basically is focusing on the threat-led penetration testing. So I thought I'd expand on Article 24 a little. General requirements. This is their language, having a sound, comprehensive digital operation resilience testing program as an integral part of your risk management framework. Think of risk management as you've identified the risks, you've put controls in place. Do you test those controls? This is what's expected, that you will test those controls and ensure that they are effective. I know many of you as customers, and this is daily bread for you guys, but that's expected. I mean, all kinds of testing, and testing individual controls is part of testing. It's not the only part, but it's part of it. Include a range of assessments, tests, methodologies, and practices. And it says here to see Article 25 and 26. Well, it's really Article 25. And I've listed them again here for so I can refer to it. Vulnerability assessments, that you pay a third party, and it has to be really a third party. I mean, you can test it yourself, but you have to then get a third party at some stage to test it, because it has to be independent. And in my experience, testing your own stuff, you're blind to your own mistakes. So get a third party to do vulnerability assessment and a penetration test on your network, on your applications. Do the open source analysis if that's applicable to you. Do network security assessments, absolutely. Are you keeping the bad guys out of your network? The physical security, the questionnaires. It might be a simple questionnaire of asking people about their practices, source code reviews, scenario-based tests, compatibility testing. I've covered these before, but just repeating them here for clarity. Performance testing. What I would say to you is the next point, follow a risk-based approach. You don't have to do all tests on all systems, but if you have critical systems and if the impact of these systems failing is significant, then you'll be expected to do more significant testing. That's as prescriptive as it gets. If you're not, one, you need to be aware of the risks, and this is why the threat-led intelligence or intelligence-led penetration testing. It's saying, listen to what's happening, listen to the intelligence coming in from the experts, from colleagues. Maybe you're involved in networking groups. That'll tell you where to focus your efforts, because if you listen to all the noise, you won't have enough resources to focus on what matters. So the idea of the intelligence-led penetration testing, or any testing, is that you're focusing on the most likely sources of problems and the biggest risks to you. Okay. Tests are undertaken by independent parties. They can be internal. Now, I think for pen testing and for vulnerability scans, I think that certainly has to be external. But I think, testing of your restoring your backup, I think that can be internal, and there's no conflicts of interest there. So you don't have to take that conflict of interest for every single test. I think testing things like restore backup has to be done by the people who are going to do it anyway. So I don't think there's any conflict of interest there, and doesn't have to be internal. So be sensible about it. Establish policies and procedures to prioritize, classify, remedy all issues revealed in tests. And this is important, that if you're in senior management team, that there is a commitment there that if weaknesses are found, that in the next management meeting, there's a status report, an update on the remediation to the things that were found. I mean, see it through. How many of us went to that school of plan, do, check, act? Plan, do, check, act, kind of the simple model of a management system. So you've checked and you found things, now act. Conduct tests at least annually on all ICT systems. We do this, and I would also add in, and if there's significant change during the year, if you've introduced a new system or operating system, or if there's been some significant change, then I would say do tests as well. Certainly in a previous life, we did tests when we had projects, integration projects or whatever. We conducted a suite of tests each time. So it's not just an annual thing that you pull off the shelf, but you will know if there's significant change, time to do some tests. Okay. Now for the heavy stuff. That was easy, that was light. But just to, if you are one of the larger organizations, and I'm not seeing all of the members, but I will go through briefly. In Article 26 of DORA, it talked about the ESA shall, in agreement with the ECB, develop joint draft regulatory technical standards in accordance with the TIBER-EU framework. TIBER-EU framework, I will show you in a moment, but basically most countries in the European Union have their version of the TIBER framework for testing. Talk about the criteria used for the purposes, the requirements and standards governing the use of internal testers, basically to spell out what was required, and that's in the RTS. I'll show you. This was the mandate. This is the TIBER-EU process. I thought a graphic is probably the best way to describe it. I have words as well behind this in the next few slides, but this is what it looks like. So at the top, generic threat landscape. That's the only bit that is not mandatory. Well, why wouldn't you start with the generic threat landscape and then focus on the threats that are relevant to your sector, to your organization? The preparation phase, engagement and scoping. Basically, the regulator is saying, thou shalt do a test, and then you start identifying threat intelligence providers, who's going to do the penetration test and scanning, what's the scope of the test, what are you going to test, what systems. And all of this is interaction with the regulator as well. The testing phase is then taking the threat intelligence, creating some attack scenarios if you're the red team. And I should probably explain the colors here at this stage. The red team, if you look at my graphic below, the red team are the bad guys. So this is your team who are acting as bad guys would, attacking your system. The threat intelligence providers are an independent third party who are telling you the most likely threats and methodologies and approaches people would use. So they're if you like, the intelligence that will direct the direction of the scenario of the test. The TLPT authority, this is your competent authority. They will have a cyber team. They will have a team that will authorize the test you're planning. Yeah, it's quite involved. Inside the organization, you have a blue team who do not know that this is a test. They are reacting to the attack and they are defending as part of their daily job. Indeed, you have to what's the word? You have to plan for the possibility that they might find out that it's a test. and you have to change and adapt to address that, because you have to keep it secret. The only people in the organization who know that this is a test is the control team, the white team. They're the ones who are coordinating it all from inside, but there has to be a wall of secrecy between the white team and the blue team. Yeah, fun, I would imagine. So the red team, using the threat intelligence, prepare an attack plan. It gets approved by the competent authority, and they attack. And this attack isn't just for a few hours. It can last days, it can last weeks, as they're attacking your systems. And when it's finished, then the remediation plan, they all come together and they report the weaknesses they found and what needs to be fixed. And then there's a remediation plan to do that. So we'll have a look at that in detail. And the result sharing, sharing is with the regulator, and maybe we'll talk about sharing in January. Okay, that's it in the graphic. Now, this is it in a couple of slides, the actual steps. Even if you're not obliged to do this, it is of interest, I would imagine, to see, if we went to the extreme, what could we do? Article 3 is really about what the competent authority has to do. They'll assign a TCT, they call it, a TLCT cyber team to your organization. Test manager, that's within the regulator. Test manager will be designated for each test. So if you're doing multiple tests, you could have multiple test managers in the competent authority that you're dealing with. And they're participating in all of this. They're approving that the plan is appropriate, if you like, and that it's not too simple, and that it is appropriate to what you're to the system you're testing. Article 4, organizational arrangements. Appoint a control team, and remember, this is secret. The control team, members of that control team are not known to anybody else. The blue team do not know who's in the control team. The financial entities shall establish organizational and procedural measures covering access to information, liaison with the test manager, that's with the competent authority, informing of the control team of any detection, and the limiting escalation. So if you detect that the blue team think this is a test, how are you going to limit the escalation? How are you going to, if the blue team, so if the blue team are escalating this and going to, I don't know, pull an emergency cord, and you don't want that to happen because it's only a test, how do you keep it secret? How do you keep it going? So you got to think all of these things through. Yeah. Article 5, and anybody who's been involved in these tests, one of the biggest risks is that your test becomes real. And, when you pulled that plug just to see if it worked, have you just now lost power to systems? That was always my fear. But as I said, you got to have, you do a lot of preparation. So when you pull that plug, you're fairly high degree of confidence. Things aren't going to go pear-shaped, but you got to assess the risks and manage those risks. Make sure that you've got your indemnity insurance in place. Have you checked the references, the credentials of the threat intelligence providers, the pen testers? All this is important, that you're dealing with those competent people, because it's on your head as an organization. And if you're, and I'm always conscious of this, if you're granting access to a third party, access to your system as a pen test, they will be possibly accessing or getting visibility of sensitive information. That's something you have to manage. And yeah, you got to carry out the restoration procedures at the end of the test and put things back the way they were. If you had to do things to make the test possible, certainly restore them and remediate the things found. Article 6 is about pooled tests, and all I would say here is that if you've got a third party that is providing a service to 20 others, they don't want to be doing 20 tests. So there is a mechanism there in place that there can be one test of their system that is valid for all 20 of their customers. and the RTS allows for that. I won't say any more on it today, but we'll talk about the Article 7, 8, and 9. So the testing starts, and specificities, I would have called specifics, I would have said, for pooled and joint TLPs. Oh yeah, that's more on the joint or pooled tests. You follow the steps, and if it's across different jurisdictions, there will be one competent authority, what they call TLPT authority, that will be the lead TLP authority. You don't have to report into several, so there'll be one nominated. So Article 8, this is where it starts. The financial entity submits a project charter within 3 months of notice. That's notice of the authority saying you shall do a test. You've got three months, and it looks something like this. Well, this is the Annex 1 of the charter. It doesn't look like too much, but you have to put a line in the sand and put in dates in there as to when you're going to do it. You set up a control team within your organization once the plan is approved, and submit the scope, then the scope of the test. This has to be approved. You have to procure the testers, so the red team and the threat intelligence providers. You put all that in place. You're constantly consulting with the test manager. That's the authority, the competent authority, along the way, and making sure that they're on board and they're happy with your choices. The testing phase. The threat intelligence provider will identify relevant threats and vulnerabilities and propose some scenarios. The control team will select 3, and they'll have consulted with the authority, the test manager and the authority, in terms of feasibility and their own context, and is this the best scenario, is it the best test? The threat intelligence provider to provide targeted threat intelligence report to the control team, who shall submit to the test manager for approval. Now, my fear in all of this, and I'm reading it, is that some of the time elapses are long, like in 8 weeks, 10 weeks. And I would say there should be some kind of feedback loop in there, that if the threat has changed, and it can change very quickly, that you have to be, and the regulator surely has to be willing to say, we got to change that because there's a new threat and we want to test this one. But yeah, the mechanics of it. Okay, second last slide, nearly there. The testing process, the red team test. So the red team, the good guys who are acting as bad guys, prepare their test plan, and using Annex 4, I'm not going to show you Annex 4, and the scope documents. They consult with the threat intelligence providers, test manager on various aspects, and they put their plan together. And once the plan is approved by the control team, they test, report weekly. Yeah, it can run over several weeks, but they have to keep it secret, and they might have to suspend if it's causing damage. I mean, if the testing is finding holes, and I know when we've got pen testing done, we some years ago we put a system up in Amazon before we had published it to our customers, and we got a pen test on, and we told them they could damage it if they wanted. That's destructive testing. It's you don't get to do it very often. These are tests in live systems, so yes, yeah, you don't want damage, and if you suspect damage is happening, you got to suspend, and all of this has to be planned in the test. Closure phase. The control team will tell the blue team, haha, it was all a test. I don't know if there'll be a haha there, it depends on the weaknesses, but yes, after weeks of them defending against the bad guys, to find out this was all an act. I really do wonder how many blue teams don't suspect early on this is a test. The testers have to submit a report within 4 weeks to the control team, who will provide to the blue team and test managers. The blue team will provide their own report 10 weeks later. There's a lot of paperwork in this, and on receiving the blue team report, and they'll show what they detected. So the red team will say, this is what we found. The blue team will say, this is what we detected. And the purple team, another color, is basically the blue and red team together. They conduct maybe an exercise to tease out, if I did that, what did you do? And I don't know. But it's maybe working the finer detail to see what do we need to do to fix it. And that's the remediation plan. Again, the financial entity has to provide a remediation plan within 8 weeks. And I'm not sure if that's 8 weeks after the report has been submitted or the same 8 weeks. It's unclear to my mind. Maybe somebody knows here. And the shortcomings, the proposed remedial action, etc., etc. Also, the root cause. If you do find a weakness, do you know exactly why? Understanding the root cause, and maybe there were several. As in all things where there's a root cause, I think there's several opportunities to catch an exposure. I would hate to think that something that is a root cause has just one control preventing it. Okay. Article 13 talks about use of external testers, about having a policy, resources, capabilities. That you confirm that these are competent, but that they have the capability and have the resources. And if you're talking about using an intra-group, one of your other entities in your large organization, they are internal. They're unequivocal about that. So you have to treat them like internal testers. And they're only used for part of it, I would say. So after all of that, if you're not withered, this was probably had the most detail of all that I looked at. And funny enough, it probably only applies to a smaller percentage of organizations, although very large organizations. Yeah, if you're one of those, you have a lot of work to do, and I'm sure you must have started a year ago. For the rest of you, read Article 24, and hopefully you have a good test program and a good mix of tests in there. Do keep aware of threats that are relevant to your sector, to your organization. It's not something you do once a month, once a year. This is something you keep up to date on. And somebody in your organization should be constantly watching the wires for threat intelligence. Maybe you have signed up to an organization that can supply this threat intelligence. I'm sure many of you have. There's one piece of information one recommendation I would make. It's test your restore. Ask your IT department, when was the last time they did a restore from the backup? And if it was more than a year ago, not good enough. If it was more than 6 months ago, I would say do it again, because 50% fail. Don't beat them up over it, but get them to do a test of the restore. You've less than a month to go until January, and I did hear rumors of a soft landing, but I don't have any proof. So as far as I'm concerned, it's still the 17th of January. Fiona, unless you've heard anything in the meantime, I know you have your ear very closely to the ground. If you want to join us.
Hi, Jerry. Hello, everybody. Soft landings. I wouldn't be putting my money on a soft landing. I guess, you could be called at any time from the 17th of January to do a test. And actually, Jerry, when you were speaking about the red team and the blue team, and you're talking about your quotes earlier on, one came to mind. Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition.
That's a good one.
Yeah, so maybe if something happened in our organization this morning, is your first thought going to be, this is a test? So I guess just treat every incident like it's
real
incident. Yeah.
And I think that's what they're trying to get with the blue team, that how would you react when we facilitate desktop scenarios. The most challenging thing is to try and get the people to treat the scenario as if it's real. And I find myself saying to people, no, don't tell me what you would do. This is now happening now. Imagine it's happening now. What are you going to do now? And to try and get people to for testing, where you're doing a desktop test like that, it is hard to get them to act as they would if it was real. So I can see the benefit of keeping it secret and having the red team, because then you get somebody's raised their hand.
Yep, Hubert. I can give him his mic.
Turn on his mic.
Yep. There you go.
Hubert. Do you want to say something, Hubert? I'm not hearing.
No,
No, or maybe you can type.
there's nothing currently in the Q&A. So
Okay.
nothing in the chat either. Just while we're waiting there, Jerry, just to go back to the 8-week window
Yeah.
for report submission. So once the TLPT authority has notified the control team that the blue team test report and the red team test report contain all the required information, that's when the clock starts for 8 weeks.
Okay. Okay. Thanks for that. And tell me, is that Hubert now? Okay. You got a question, Hubert?
I don't know if you can hear me.
Yeah,
we can hear you now. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No, I just wanted to ask you: do you plan to circulate these slides? Great material, and we'd love to get a copy.
Yeah. You should have them within 24 hours from RAID. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
No problem, Hubert. And the document that I used, it's 2024 JC 29. And maybe Fiona, you might comment. It's still draft as far as I could see.
It's still drafting so far as the commission has accepted it from the EBA and put it out as a commission delegated regulation, but it's not yet an EC 2024 / and until the Parliament and Council sign off. But let's take, in my
Not much is going to
experience,
change.
yeah, in my experience, Jerry, and yours, when we've moved from JCs to CDs, it's dots and dashes.
Yeah.
I think there was one in 33. Do you remember where they amalgamated 2 articles, but nothing material. So I don't expect anything from this either, really.
Okay. Okay. That's important, and certainly from my experience with ISO standards, when you get to a final draft, to get a vote on it, it might take 3 months, but it's nothing really substantive changes. It's not an excuse that will be accepted. Don't know what else I can say, guys. I think, yeah, there is an awful lot in it when you drill down into it. But if you're not one of those large organizations in Article 2 that were mentioned, still don't underestimate the expectation that you are testing your plans. And I've always found that testing does help you sleep, honestly. Like I said, if you know that somebody said to me at 4 o'clock one morning after we did a test of our UPS, that test where we pull the plug basically, and it was an engineer, he says, that's the way to do it. He said, now we know it works. And that is a great relief.
Yeah, and I think we can't underline enough the risk-based approach. If you're dealing with a critical service and you pull power, you better be damn sure that your UPS is going to work and doesn't leave you in a situation, like you said, with a real scenario on your hands. Yeah.
If there was appetite for it, we some years ago we did a webinar on just exercises, and I would summarize them. There's three levels of exercises. There's the component test, where you would test maybe like restoring a backup, restoring restoring a backup. You might test full installation of a system, restoring a server. Let's say you had a hardware failure and you had to spin up a new server. All of these individual tests you can do as component testing. And then there's the desktop scenario exercise, where you do a what if, and spread out over 2 hours, you present a scenario and see how people react. That's still, I would say, low cost, low risk. Where it gets expensive,
and if you're very lucky, as lucky as Jerry's clients were, it'll be a real scenario in less than 6 weeks.
Yeah, she's referring to the pandemic scenario, which I did in January 2020, and then it turned out to be very real. But that's another story. But the third one is the live testing, and the best examples of this is where you see sometimes the police. the ambulance and the fire brigade doing a joint exercise of a major road incident, and they're costly, they're disruptive, and if you do it in your own organization where you have a real testing on live systems, don't underestimate the risks. That section is in there for a reason. Assess the risks, because you don't want this test to become a serious incident. All right. If there are no questions, that's fine. Then we will leave it at that. It is 1:15, so we've used up our time. Hopefully, this give you some food for thought. And as I confirmed, we'll send you the slides and a link to the recording. And from me,
Happy
I just wish you a
Christmas.
happy Christmas.
Yeah.
We can say that now. It's the 10th, so I think it's okay to say it. And we'll see you in January, on January the what was it, the 15th?
2 days before.
January the 14th.
Mm.
Thank you.
Great.
Okay.
Okay, thanks, Jerry.
Thank you, Fiona. Thank you, folks. Bye-bye.